Hello friends, today I'll be giving you a brief guide to Disruptor. He has become very popular in the 4 and 5 role. You may have seen him in the pro scene where, I'll give you a warning, he'll look a little better there because the teams will play around his skill set more. They pick strong laners to abuse glimpse and kinetic field and then early active plays to keep it going with Disruptor. In pub games, that won't happen as much, so it can feel really bad if it's like super passive or just like you fall behind, things like that. But because in pub games, people are really bad at positioning, you can still find a lot of value with Disruptor. So I still think he's good in pub games, but I just want you to know it may feel a little different from the pros. The new H build is to max glimpse, which I guess you were doing in the past anyways, but you can get points in it earlier than you used to, and that is because it now does damage 50 at minimum, but there's a higher amount depending on how far they travel, 1400 distance being when you get the max damage. So it's now more useful in the laning stage, whereas before, no damage, it felt kind of weird to use, right? Hopefully, you have a strong core with you, so the idea is that you'll both right-click, maybe the core will use spells, you'll kind of like chase the enemy away, they're running away from you, you glimpse them back, you trap them in kinetic field to give you more time to continue to just auto-attack, and that's where the damage is coming from, because kinetic field does no damage, and glimpse, it does some damage, but it's like, you know, it's not like the most damaging spell out there. So you're going to buy right-click items that you'll see in a bit, and hopefully your core is strong as well. If they aren't, because they've picked someone really weak and trapping them in kinetic field would do nothing to you, or they have no reason to run from you, so you're never going to get to use glimpse, you can take a point in Thunderstrike at level 1 or level 2, maybe like glimpse Thunderstrike, something like this. You can get, I would say, up to 2 points in Thunderstrike for the laning stage, but you really want to get this glimpse maxed out first to get the longer cast range, reduced cooldown. It's why you're picking Disruptor. If you're maxing Thunderstrike, there's a lot of better supports that you could max like their spells to do damage and things like that. So hopefully you only need like 2 points to strengthen up your laning stage if it's like really bad matchup or something. But ideally at some point you'll do some variation to end up at 7 points in glimpse and then 1 in each of these. After that, you're going to max out kinetic field in most cases. Again, it's just going to help you play with your team. You're going to trap people for longer. A 10-second cooldown with a 4.4 duration. It means it's up a ton, especially as we get to the talents in a bit. So that's why people are usually maxing this first, and they play a very utility style of Disruptor. You can max Thunderstrike first, and maybe depending on your MMR, especially the lower MMRs, you might want to do this. And I don't know. I guess you could max it first, but I don't know, again, play a different hero maybe. This will help you do more damage, help you get more farm, push things out. But I don't know. I think the kinetic field build is a lot better. The downside being that, as you can see, it would not help you farm very much, and that's why you're dependent on your team to be active and play with you and use these. And if they don't do that, it feels really bad. Now, after this, you'll just max out Thunderstrike or kinetic field, whichever one you didn't get as you level up. Take your ult whenever you get, and then for talent, go ahead and skip. Well, okay, first you're going to take the kinetic field cooldown. The Thunderstrike damage and Thunderstrike, it actually does give a lot of damage, but it's just not why you play Disruptor. So you're going to want the -3 second kinetic field duration, and when you level up kinetic field, you'll notice it also goes down by 3 seconds cooldown, so there's no reason to take this talent at level 10. Go ahead and level up kinetic field all the way before taking this talent. If you go Thunderstrike first, I would skip this talent probably. And maybe if you're maxing Thunderstrike because you want damage, then you are getting this talent. I don't know, again. It's not something you should like plan to do every game. This is like the default. So 3 seconds on kinetic field, then the static storm, then the kinetic field again, then the static storm. The reason being is this is your combo, and in the late game, if you can get an Aghanims, the longer and larger your static storm is, the better, because you're going to mute enemy items. That's super powerful, especially if you're trapping them in your kinetic field for like 6 seconds. And at this point, because you took the cooldown, it's a 7-second cooldown with a 6.4 second duration. So it's pretty much permanently up, and you can just really screw people over because they have BKBs, but eventually those goes down. So if they're stuck, they can't really do much, and that's kind of why you take these talents. For your starting items, I told you earlier, you're going to depend a lot on your right click for harass. So many disruptors are buying cheap stats like Iron Branches, Fairy Fire, and then a Circlet if they don't need anything else for the stat efficient or slot efficient stats. And so you'll just right click a lot. And because Glimpse and Kinetic Field aren't that expensive, you'll be okay without mana, and you're not spamming them either, right? You have to wait for the right opportunity for them to run away, glimpse them back, all that. So he's kind of okay without mana. If you're going to do the Thunderstrike build though, and get, you need it like at least 1 point or 2 early, then you're gonna want mangoes. I'd get like at least 3, but I've seen people like plan to buy even more than that because Thunderstrike is a little bit expensive. But if that's what you need to do, it's what you need to do. You're just gonna need to buy a lot of mangoes and maybe like a clarity. If you need to buy anything else like a stick, windlace, whatever, then just drop the circlet and, maybe the second set of tangos or the iron branch, whatever, to fit in whatever you need. So like the stick, sentries, all that stuff. If you don't need any of those, though, this has been pretty common. From there, get your boots, your wand. If you think you'll get a veil, you can get the Ring of Basilius. You can get either boots, tranquils, or arcane boots. If you're doing the Glimpse kinetic build, you actually, like I said, you don't use a lot of mana, so you're actually fine on tranquils. And because you want to play a lot with your team, a lot of people are actually going tranquils and then the drums into the bongo boots. That really encourages and strengthens your early team play. If you're not doing that as much, and especially if you're going the Thunderstrike build, you're going to need more mana, then you might want to do arcane boots. Even if you're doing the Glimpse build, you can still get arcane boots. It kind of just depends what your team needs. So take a look at them, see like, hey, they're really mana intensive, no one else is going to buy arcane boots, then I'll get arcane boots. But if they don't really need it and they would actually benefit from drums a lot, then this has been also very popular. If it's not a really good drums game for your team, you don't really need arcane boots, or maybe you do, it doesn't really matter. They're just the usual support stuff. Force Staff and Glimmer are perfectly fine. If it looks good and you're doing well, you can get the Aghanims, like I said, really powerful, one of the best in the game to mute enemy items. So you can get this, but you also don't have to have it. Like, you don't need to rush this first item. It gets better as they pick up more items and you're muting all of those. So I would probably still pick up like at least a Force Staff or a Glimmer before moving into the Ags, but feel free to adjust depending on the game. If your team is doing really well and they're all magic damage based, then Veil could be good instead of drums. So that's another option for you. You yourself, you do magic damage, but it's not like a ton, so don't really buy it just to amp yourself. Make sure your team actually needs the Veil. Besides these, whatever support items you think you need, always adjust for the game. You're free to do so. Yeah. Oh, you can also get a Blink Dagger just for, general purposes. It's useful. It also makes your catch range ridiculous. You can blink, glimpse people. But especially once you pick up the Aghanims, if anyone on your team initiates, or it might even be you initiating, you blink in, drop the ult so that the enemy is muted and they can't use any of their items, throw up that kinetic field, all that stuff, and they are trapped in there for however many seconds, depending how many talents you have. That's why that Blink Dagger can be really good. A couple things you may want to know about your abilities. Thunderstrike is pretty straightforward, but it is dispellable, so be careful when using it against heroes like Abaddon or LC. That's not to say you can never use it against them, but just know they'll probably dispel it and get more value out of that spell, because Thunderstrike will do the first instance of damage, which is not a lot, 35 or 60, depending on how many points you have, and then they dispel it. They get full value out of their spell, you don't. However, you can plan to essentially out-mana them, buy a lot of mangoes, you're already in intelligence heroes, so you just spam Thunderstrike, force them to dispel a lot, and then they can't use their mana on anything else. Glimpse sends its target back where they were 4 seconds ago. It launches this little projectile, and when that projectile reaches that blue spot here, the target will come back. At most, it'll take 1.8 seconds. So if someone TPs, you'll notice that projectile will fly across the map to make it to that spot within 1.8 seconds. Otherwise, if it's going to be less than 1.8 seconds, the projectile travels at 600 units per second. So if someone only is going a short distance, you'll notice it just moves a little less like that, and it does not take 1.8 seconds. This makes it difficult to combo sometimes, and this is probably the harder part of playing Disruptor, knowing where they are 4 seconds ago, and then how long it's going to be to put up your kinetic field and static storm in time. The easiest counter to getting glimpsed is going to be the BKB or any other spell immune ability that prevents you from being glimpsed. Yules will not work, so if you try to use Yules, you'll actually still just show up at the target. If you're invulnerable, either from Yules or things like Shadow Realm, you'll still be glimpsed. However, if you're hidden from the world, so like Astral or Umanta at the exact right time, other things are like Jaunt from, Phase Shift from Puck, Tricks of the Trade from Ricky, Snowball. I'll pop up a list here, but if you're hidden from the world, then you cannot be glimpsed back and you'll avoid it. However, you can't really buy an item besides Manta to do that, and it's not easy to do either. It's a very precise timing. So Only some heroes will like naturally have that counter, and you don't really need to memorize it. You'll learn it when you do it, and you're like, oh, he didn't show up. That's a counter. But many heroes do not have a response besides to BKB, which is why it's so good. Kinetic Field is a little whack, so it's going to come up after a 1-second delay. It's going to be a little tricky sometimes to trap people. That's just a matter of practice. It works from both sides, so whether you're in Kinetic Field or out of Kinetic Field, you can't walk through it. It forcefully sets your movement speed to 0, so you'll still be moving, you're not stunned or anything, but you just cannot move. You can turn around and walk out, then that's fine. You can't usually get out of Kinetic Field, and I honestly don't know which of these are bugs or intentional, but things like Night Stalker ult, like you're flying, you have like leaps, they don't typically work to get through the stuff, but then things like Zeus can jump over. I don't really get it. You can also toss people out, so I don't know if it's like a certain level of how high you get launched, but I also don't understand why then like flying units don't always get out. I don't really know. You're just going to experience it on the fly, and you're like, interesting. It doesn't work on spell immune units either, though, so that's the easiest way. You just like BKB, walk through it. Force Staff won't get you through either, so usually you're trapped in there, but sometimes you're not. Oh, and also I forgot to say, Glimpse cancels channels, so things like teleports or Crystal Maiden ult, very useful for that. Kinetic Field also provides ground vision starting from the center of its, like the field. So you can use this to check high ground. It's very useful, and I'm highlighting that it's from the center of the field. So for example, if I put this like over here, you'll notice I can't see on this side of the trees because it's coming from the middle going outwards. But if you place it like inside, then I will see inside the trees, but actually I won't see this outside part anymore. So you just kind of have to keep that in mind when you're placing it. Usually it's not such a huge deal, especially if you're just checking wards. Like just use this on top of the cliff and then it's fine. But you can try to find people as they run through trees using Kinetic Field, but sometimes you won't see like everything in there, and that's because it's ground vision. Glimpse will instantly kill most illusions, so like things from Manta, but it will not kill strong illusions such as Chaos Knight's ult. One of these is real, one of them's an illusion. I don't know which one. It just glimpses the strong illusions like usual, and well, that's it. It won't kill them. Something you should always look for is to potentially glimpse someone back who has teleported into the lane. Really at any point of the game, but laning stage especially. Further on in the game, it might just be useful to them, so be a little careful depending on the situation. But some people have even gone so far as to start placing observers behind or in front of the tower as Disruptor. Usually as Disruptor 4, as you're playing against the safe lane. Disruptor 5, maybe when you grab an observer later, you can place one up here. It's not so common to place one here at the very start. But even without the observer, say you just get a kill, go like hide behind a tree, and as they respawn, typically what everyone does is immediately teleport. So kind of just time it, walk out, and find them. And if you can glimpse them back, it takes 30 seconds to walk back to the lane, so it's hugely impactful. That's all I've got for you today. Thank you for watching. I will see you in another video. Bye.